Well, my friends, and those who don't see themselves as my friends but are forced to watch this video, welcome to Chapter 17. For many of you, this is going to be the most important chapter in this textbook because it is reading that you will be teaching the most. But to tell the truth, I wasn't really impressed with this chapter. Anyway, let's have a look inside to see what hints we can get to become better teachers. Nothing to see here, just our usual objectives. I hope to help you increase your understanding of the theories of teaching reading, and also to give you a few chances to think of some ideas about teaching reading in enjoyable and effective ways. We have less topics than last chapter, but still there are a few things we need to cover. Hopefully we can get through it in 10 minutes, but it's unlikely. Alright, we have a bit of a change with our first discussion topic this chapter. I'm not going to ask you to think about your reading proficiency, but instead going to ask you to share your strategies for improving your reading ability. What do you do? What have you done in the past that was successful? What have you done that was not successful? Remember, thinking about what was not successful is just as important as thinking about what was successful, because we can get hints about what works best for us and what doesn't. So get your thinking caps on and share your ideas in class. Well, we start off with a big one, as we look into how teaching reading has been covered in research in the past, and teaching reading skills has received a lot of attention. We've talked about bottom-up and top-down processing before, right? It happens in reading too. Bottom-up processing refers to when we look at small parts of language first, then move on to the meaning, whereas top-down refers to when we call upon our intelligence and experience to understand the text first. Recent research has shown that, like listening, a combination of these two processes is best. We've also talked about the importance of background knowledge, or schemata. Again, like listening, having a knowledge of a broad range of topics will help us understand better. Some researchers argue, however, that readers can gain this background knowledge through the text itself. One question many research projects ask is whether it is better for students to be set free when reading, or to have some kind of strategy. Most research suggests that having strategies is better. Help students create a plan and reflect on their reading in order to improve. Extensive reading is very popular these days. The main idea with ER is for students to simply enjoy reading. This way, their language skills will naturally develop. Just because someone can read very quickly, it doesn't mean he or she can understand the content well. Likewise, reading slowly might not lead to higher comprehension either. Finding the best reading speed while using strategies such as skimming and scanning will lead to better reading speed and comprehension, or what is known as automaticity. Obviously, having a good grasp of vocabulary is also going to help your reading skills. Paul Nation is one of, if not the most respected researcher of vocabulary acquisition. We'll talk more about this in a couple of chapters. Something that many teachers tend to forget is that reading needs to be enjoyable. If you don't love reading, it can be very difficult to comprehend, even the easiest stories. There are plenty of genres of writing that we need to read, as you can see on page 396. But being aware of the characteristics of written language that might affect comprehension might be more useful for us and our students. So here we go again. First, unlike spoken language, written language is permanent. You can go back and read again if you need to. Because written language is permanent, readers have a lot more time to process the information and read at the speed that suits them best. Then we also have distance, not only where the author wrote the text in comparison to where the reader is reading, but when. If a story about technology, for example, were written 10 years ago, it would be very different to a story written 1 year ago. Spelling, or its fancier name orthography, and other aspects of written language, such as punctuation, pictures, and graphs, can help comprehension. Spelling can also, however, make life difficult for readers too. When speaking, we tend to use short sentences, but writing is often more complex. The examples on page 399 show how the same information is spoken in 4 short sentences, but then written in one longer complex sentence. These longer sentences might be harder to follow from time to time. And as if you hadn't had enough of vocabulary, here's a little more. In addition to the complexity of sentence structures, written language will usually use a little more complex and higher level vocabulary. Our textbook suggests readers should avoid using a bilingual dictionary, but I disagree. Now that sounds like a discussion topic. And finally, we have formality. Spoken language often lacks order and structure, but written language usually has clear structure. This helps the reader find the main points in an essay, or the food he or she wants to eat on a menu pretty easily. We are continuing on from listening and speaking with the micro and macro skills of reading. You can see on page 401 that micro skills refer to the recognizable, smaller parts of the written discourse, where macro skills require readers to make inferences about the underlying meanings of what is written. Make sure you look through the list to get a better idea of what both are all about. What do you think? Shall we have a discussion? I mentioned a couple of slides ago about dictionaries, and that our textbook suggests an English dictionary to be better. However, I disagreed. What do you think? In the context you teach in, or will be teaching in, are bilingual dictionaries better than monolingual dictionaries? How about electronic dictionaries and paper dictionaries? Get your ideas together and prepare for a good discussion. So how can we and our students become better at reading? One of the big parts about teaching language is passing on strategies that others and we ourselves have found successful to our students. There are 10, yes 10, in our textbook. Let's have a super quick look at each one. First, identify the purpose. Why are we reading the passage? Next, use bottom-up strategies by looking within the words for hints on how to read them. We also need to be thinking about silent reading techniques to increase reading speed. Don't be concerned about each word's pronunciation to increase reading speed. Try to read sets of words, not individual ones. Skimming through the text at the beginning helps you find the key words, which give you hints about the overall meaning. Scanning is also a good strategy and different to skimming because you know the information you are looking for. Just like listening, we need to look for word chunks and connections within the passage to increase the speed of our understanding. Sometimes, if we don't know the meaning of a word, we can get hints by reading the surrounding discourse. We don't always need to reach for a dictionary. You can also look within the words if you don't understand something. Knowing the meanings of Latin roots like un and anti, for example, can be really useful. Sometimes there are differences between what is written and the actual meaning. By this, I mean the implied meaning, right? Learning a bit of pragmatics helps a lot. Finally, in writing, we see a lot of discourse markers, or basically particular words that indicate the flow of the passage. Having a good understanding of such words, like the ones we see on page 407, will increase our reading skills. Like the last chapter, there are plenty of principles for teaching reading in our textbook. How about we just look at two of them? When choosing material, we want to look for something as authentic as possible. We've talked about that before. But at the same time, authentic material is often too difficult for language students, so it needs to be simplified. Try to choose material that balances authenticity and readability. The second point I would like to make is about pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading. We covered this back in the Teaching Listening chapter as well. Giving tasks for students to do before, during, and after the reading exercise will help develop their proficiency from various angles. Finally, and I think this is the 5th time I've said finally, we have assessment of reading. Again, we'll talk more about this later in the book, but check pages 422 and 423 for a couple of ideas on ways you might check your students' progress in their reading skills. Having a nice collection of assessment ideas is always great to call on. Our final discussion topic is the same as it has been for the last couple of chapters. I would like you to come up with an activity to use in the classroom that will help improve your students' reading skills. You can use some of the ideas in the textbook, but as always, aim to make your activity as original as possible. Well, that is it for this chapter. Well done us on getting through to the end. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in class.